In this room. Okay, so essentially we've spent in this country and around the world the last 60 plus years building a centralized, hyper-efficient food system using technology, really, and it feeds a lot of people. It's very efficient. It feeds the world, but it also creates a lot of problems. Everything from pesticide runoff to obesity, disappearing family farms, local rural economies that are falling apart. So there's growing demand for food that's produced closer to where we live, more sustainably from people that we know and trust. And there's a lot of activity. There's a lot of growth. There's at least $8 billion a year in sales of food, more or less direct from farms to consumers, restaurants, hospitals, universities, institutions. So there's a lot of activity, and most of this is happening many to many. You've got farmers calling a bunch of restaurants, restaurants having relationships with a bunch of farmers. You've got school programs where people are trying to find sourcing. So it's working, but everybody recognizes that this is never going to scale. It's just too complicated. And of course they've got these, it's literally phones and Post-it notes and fax machines still. So, but what's also happening in this market is there's an evolution, there's a new player that we call the market makers. We've actually been really struggling with language for this space to figure out what we call even our customers. And so what we've seen is there's a new kind of aggregator, whether it's a farmer who's aggregating from neighboring farms to sell to restaurants or through a buying club. There are independent distributors. We work with the girl with the pickup truck who picks up from farms and delivers to restaurants. You've got producer co-ops, formal co-ops, that groups of farmers and growers who might come together with diverse products so that they can increase their market. And sometimes they might be coming together like an organic valley, which is all around dairy products. So you've got people coming up with new ways of getting food from the farm to the end user. And I'm going to talk, Local Orbit is focusing on the people that are connecting farmers and other food producers with restaurants and institutions. We can support the other buyers in the system, but we've determined that we see the most value for a farmer in terms of both volume and the margins they get in terms of the price by going direct to these wholesale buyers rather than the challenge it takes to get to many consumers, or rather than the price pressure you get by selling to grocery stores. So that's sort of what we've learned over the last couple of years, is how to really narrow down what we do. And you've got a lot of people that are stepping in to do this. But these market makers have the same obstacles. They've got really bad tools. We know that small businesses around the world have been revolutionized by software services and cloud-based tools that you can use to manage your business, but nobody's built tools that work for complex local food distribution. There's really big supply chain management tools. There's tools that help freelance writers and freelance designers, but there's nothing that really works on all the layers with what's going on in this space. So, and the other thing is, so these guys are helping to push the amount of local food that gets sold further into the market. They're increasing what's happening, but if they don't have the tools to support their businesses, they're not going to scale and they're going to go out of business. So if you think about it, I'm a manager of a producer co-op, and I've got 20 farms selling a mix of fruits and vegetables and maybe some meats and maybe some dairy products. And I am on the phone with restaurants. I'm on the phone with those 20 producers or 40 producers every week trying to figure out what they have. I'm managing it with a Google spreadsheet if I'm good. I'm doing invoicing with QuickBooks, which is not built for this. I may have some inventory management. I got emails. I've got no way to kind of bring all the processes to run an efficient business. So I'm wasting a lot of time that I could be spending finding new products or finding new buyers and building the market. So that's where we come in. We basically have decided that the best way to support this emerging sector is to build a set of e-commerce and business management tools to support what we see as the new food economy. And we know that there are lots of people working in different ways. And again, we call them market makers. They all operate a little bit differently. And what we've tried to do none of them can afford to build their own tools. You know, they're trying to cobble together what they can. There's a handful of nonprofits that have gotten grant money, mostly from the USDA, to build a website, and there's a history of failed technology plays and tens of millions of dollars that have gone from grant funding into building static websites where you pay a developer and the developer walks away. And so there's been this kind of tension and this inability for anybody to find something that works for this market because it's difficult. The only way that you can provide, it's scalable infrastructure. I'll use the word scalable. I don't like to, it's a little bit buzzy, but something that allows things to be amplified and support many different operations is through a cloud-based technology infrastructure. And our challenge in designing local orbit is to figure out, through all the different business models, all the different kinds of market makers, all the regional differences, how do we find the common needs? And how do we support them while still allowing people to have their own brand, their own business processes, and their own rules? And that's essentially the technology that we've spent some time developing. And so what we know is everybody needs to have some way for people to buy. It's the e-commerce, it's the order management. Everybody needs some kind of payment system. So you need to, whether it's purchase orders, credit cards, and we're just adding e-checks, which is basically electronic transfers. Everybody needs some form of inventory management. Sometimes it's simple inventory where you can say, I have 10 items available to sell, and you need to know every time somebody buys one of those units so you don't oversell. You'd be amazed at how often people do that. Sometimes, because this is food, it's not so simple. You're dealing with expiration dates, you're dealing with lot numbers, so you have to know what field it came from, or you have to know what date something was picked and when it expired. So we actually offer both options. And the other thing is, when you're building for an emerging market and you're building for farmers and people who are in this because of their values and mission, you also have to think about how much time they want to spend on technology. So you also have to design something that's simple. It's a complex system, and you've got to come up with the most simple processes. Everybody needs fulfillment and logistic tools. So you need to have, in the food business, it's a pick list. Well, in any kind of business, it's what you pull from the field or what you pull out of the refrigerator. You need to have packing slips. And so in our system, it's direct sales from farmers, and they're being aggregated at a central spot, a market or a hub. So the farmers need to know how to prepare the order for their buyers, and then you need a set of documents that helps the aggregator pull the orders together. So if you order from these 4 farmers, all of you are going to pack separately, and then you're going to deliver to Cheryl, who's the aggregator. So Cheryl's going to look at your packing slips and look at her pick slip and make sure what she's got matches, and then put it all together with a label or on a truck or in a box or whatever, and then get it to you. So there's layers of communication and stories that go through this process. Everybody needs marketing and messaging. You need to tell your buyers what's available. In the fresh food business, there's something called a weekly fresh sheet. So we generate a fresh sheet automatically from real-time inventory. One of my customers used to spend 8 hours every Monday building a fresh sheet from disparate inventory services. They take a quick look and they press a button and it goes to all their buyers. So we save them 8 hours a week of labor, essentially. Messaging, separate from marketing, separate from newsletters and promotional things, you need to tell people what needs to happen next. So if you place your order, each of these 4 farmers is going to get an email that says, hey, you've got an order, and then so's the hub, so's the aggregator. And then you guys are going to get a reminder saying, hey, don't forget, tomorrow you deliver, and you're going to get your reminder to say, look out, it's coming, or if the rule is you pick it up, go pick it up tomorrow, and this is the time. So you've got to continually make sure that people are informed. And again, these are important things to them. This is how they make money, but they're also busy in the field harvesting and producing. So it's not their primary focus in some ways. It's not like the person on Etsy who loves watching for the sale to happen and you're like, get really excited and you go and you pack it up and ship, because they're just doing so much. So And then the last thing is everybody needs a way to analyze, assess, and learn from their business. So there's reporting tools that are primarily financial, but you can also look at the number of buyers, and you can look at sales by payment types. And we're actually, one of the things I'm really excited about is we are going to work on some really nice data visualization tools over the course of the next year that'll make it really easy for people. Right now it's very much tables and spreadsheets, which I don't love, but you just have to do something simple to get it out there. But I think we have a lot of opportunity to build really useful data for our users and also for other people to learn about the system. So essentially what we do is we provide a suite of services that help people build profitable businesses, which is very important because without profitable businesses, they're going to go under. And by having a series of values-based businesses focused on increasing the amount of local food that is sourced within a community, you're going to get healthier for all the reasons that we discussed in terms of the problems of centralization. So what I'd like to do is actually take a little detour, though, and tell you how I got here. So Local Orbit actually started as a theater project. I'm not a technologist, and I'm interested in food systems. I had no experience with food systems, other than the fact that my grandfather was a restaurant distributor, and I had family that owned restaurants, and my immigrant family started as fruit peddlers when they came to the States, and I had a great uncle who was a corned beef and lox processor in Detroit. So I knew a lot about the food business just growing up in it, but I'm a playwright. I have an MFA in playwriting, and I'm a director. And I still make, in my own way, art that comes from conversations with communities and with professional artists. And I have spent a lot of time working in Detroit and in South Africa. And I basically got interested in technology because I was working on a project about walking and desire lines. Can you see this? This is a desire line. Desire lines it's an urban planning term for the paths that people make off the grid that somebody's planned for us. It's used a lot in planning campuses. These are vacant lots in Detroit. There's also paths across fields in South Africa, which I had seen. So what I wanted to do was learn about technology to tell stories through mapping. So I decided to go back to graduate school kind of mid-career. I actually for a year, I went to NYU's Interactive Technology program, which I'm sure a lot of you guys had considered, and learned a lot about social technology and mapping, and studied with good thinkers like Doug Rushkoff and Clay Shirky, and people who are really thinking about what you could do with technology. So I went back, and I was working on, what was I doing? Specifically working on the walking project and taking walks and we built 4 multidisciplinary, cross-disciplinary residency projects, 2 in South Africa in KwaZulu-Natal at the University of Pietermaritzburg, and 2 in Detroit. And we brought artists from both countries together, and we did performance, mapping, walking, visual arts, and a lot of community-oriented activities. We did workshops with urban planners. We did workshops with social workers who we found were using desire lines as a way to find out where the homeless population was. We were talking to a brownfields regeneration, a volcanologist, a person who studies volcanoes, but was using that information in Detroit to look at brownfields or polluted fields that had the most environmental damage. And he's like, oh, we've got all these fields, but we don't know how to prioritize how to test them. But maybe we can look at the desire lines where people are walking and start with those lots and actually look at regenerating brownfields based on how they're used. So you start to have these really great conversations. But what I really do in all of this is I create space where people can come together across diverse backgrounds who would never come together, across demographic, economic, every barrier, and have a conversation. And the thing that was really interesting about walking is everybody has a relationship with walking. Whether or not you walk, we all have stories and an understanding of it. So it was a really good opportunity for people to come together. And so I thought my next project was going to be around food, which is obviously probably the only other thing that we all have a relationship with. And as I started doing research about food, talking to farmers, talking to food service people, it's when I really started to learn about food system problems. And then with the technology work and having gone back to school and reading a lot and becoming very interested in social technologies and eventually the cloud, I thought, there's something that somebody could do. And a friend of mine actually sat me down one day and said, Erika, this is a business. He sat me down at a bar in Soho. The first farm-to-table shop, it was Savoy. It was Peter Hoffman's restaurant. And he's like, you need to do this. It took me a little bit of time to shift gears. But so Local Orbit really started as a theater project. And what I really learned, and actually I don't often tell that story when I'm going and talking to investors and people. And a few months ago I was pitching in Grand Rapids, Michigan, which actually has got amazing design stuff. It's the home of Steelcase and Herman Miller, and it's kind of a surprising community. So I was pitching to some investors, and in this beautiful, perfectly designed space. And I don't know what led me to do this, but I said I'm going to start with my theater background. And I didn't know that much about their individual personal backgrounds, so it was a great pitch. These guys subsequently became investors in Local Orbit, and we went out for a drink, of course, afterwards. And one of the guys in the fund had worked on a cloud-based supply chain management platform, probably the first transportation management platform in the cloud that revolutionized the routing of trucks. And he said to me, Erika, we love this. This is makes sense. He said, because supply chains are stories. And I said, my supply chains are stories? He said, yeah. So, because essentially we're all talking about supply chains. And I started thinking about it, and he's right. Because really a supply chain works when the right person gets the right information to do the right thing at the right time, so the food in this case ends up where it's supposed to go. There's each one of those steps is bigger, but ultimately it's about communicating. And what's really interesting, what I like about digital media is all digital media is bits of information and images, which are bits of information that are stories, or that are phrases that make up stories. And what's really powerful in the context of the supply chain story is that one person can enter that information in, and we can find a really seamless, efficient way for it to move to get the next person to do the next thing. So it increases efficiency, it reduces the potential for errors, and it helps make it easier for people to solve this really big problem. And so Local Orbit is a technology company. That is what we are. I focus on building a good tech team, but we're not about the technology. We're really about giving people the tools to tell stories and do their job well, which is what I find to be the most interesting part about this. So I'm going to leave this for questions and discussion right now. Yeah.
I'm just kind of curious for your platform, how out of the box it is for all of the farmers that you're working with, and how much you have to customize it individually for each of them.
We don't. So the first thing is the farmers we have a really interesting who's your customer problem. Mm-hmm. So our customers are the market maker. I go to the aggregator. So I'm not going to go to you guys. I'm going to go to Cheryl as the aggregator, and she's the one who's going to say I want to use this. Or unless you're also one of those aggregators, unless you're bringing lots of farmers and buyers together. So the first thing is I have to sell that person, but the farmers and the buyers are also my customers. And the buyers are really my customers because they're the ones that are paying the money that will keep everybody using my system. So the first thing is that I have to look at what the aggregator's business process is, and they're already using some stuff. So it's not, and quite frankly, very few farmers are not using anything. So what we've really done in order to be scalable and viable as a small business is that we've set enough different configurations that can be automatic by literally like toggle switches and check boxes so that we don't have to do a lot of customization. And we've tried to build the product in conversation with real users. And every step of the way from prototyping to our kind of beta last year, we built everything with the customer in mind. And my philosophy and what my team's philosophy is, don't build it until you absolutely have to and you know what the specifications will be. And it's also why we've been able to do it really leanly. I mean, we're competing with people that have raised $10 million, and we haven't raised $1 million yet. So there's also a strategy to working with our users as partners so that we can anticipate what the next group will need. I think that's kind of how I look at it. The other thing I was going to say is that we're building a platform. We're not building a single system. We're building a platform like, I don't know if anybody uses Evernote here or Salesforce.com. We don't think that any technology company, Salesforce is its own piece of...
Don't get her started.
So Salesforce is great because for some people it does everything they need, but there's an ecosystem, another one of those words that I can't come up with a better non-buzz for. There's a bunch of plugins. There's a bunch of developers, or you can develop. So what we're actually moving toward is if somebody needs something that isn't organic to local orbit, there'll be an API and a set of developer tools this year. And we're actually starting to work on some of those first integrations, and that's how you also can solve customization needs. Yeah.
Just watching this is fantastic. I have a real strong interest in trying to understand ways that local businesses or even entrepreneurs can compete and thrive up against the giant big box global economy.
Mm-hmm.
Now that all your work's done in food, have you ever thought about how this could translate to other businesses, and what are your thoughts on that? Because it looks like there are opportunities to streamline.
It's not called local food or local agriculture anything for a reason. Is about all I will say. Okay, and we've actually, and I've started to think about this, but yeah, it's about local supply chains. And in fact, I wasn't going to do this, but one of the first things I thought is, sustainable, reusable building materials. Food is a big market, and there's a big need, and it will give our company what we need to really have an impact, and then there's a platform, I think. And we actually do have people selling non-food items on our platform, like handmade rugs and body products and art even. So we've also built, and I don't know how many of you guys know anything about databases and taxonomy. When I say taxonomy, does that mean anything? So in order to structure data, you have to have a set of rules. It's a language, essentially. One of the challenges in designing any database, but especially for food, when there's so many different ways to label something, is the taxonomy. And that's actually been, there's a huge standardized taxonomy when you go into a barcode scanning in the supermarket, but it doesn't work for local food systems, but that's the standard. And then you've got other people that have tried to build these complex taxonomies, and so what we've done is we'll see where it gets us, but we've built a really flexible taxonomy system. So we're not working with innovative tools per se, but I think we're designing them in an innovative way. And so it's very easy for us to instantly add something that will respond to a market's need without messing with the data tables and the other structure.
Right on the walking path and diagram project. But then when you brought up having like some sort of sustainable, reusable building material thing, I'd actually, if you feel comfortable elaborating on that, I'd love to know more about it.
There's so much especially in sort of the industrial sort of Rust Belt cities that could be used to rebuild everything, that we wouldn't even have to create new infrastructure, but it's going to be cost effective. So one of the things that connects it with food is the centralization and the streamline and the new, and sometimes ripping down a building and building a new building. They're cheaper and they're more efficient, and so not everybody can afford it. I mean, it's a reason that like local food or beautiful restored barnwood are often only available to people who have a lot of money. But I think if you can find ways within all of these systems to strip out as much of the inefficiency as possible, you can start to get some kind of like the prices can come together. And the other thing that I would say that I see this happening with food, and I think this will probably happen if we come out of this recession properly with building materials, is that the cost of oil approaching peak oil, and the cost of transportation is driving up, and even the cost of fertilizers and inputs in processes is driving up the cost of things that we're accustomed to having be really cheap. And so prices are starting to equalize, so there's going to be less of a shift.
I've recently become very interested in like veganism and like the amounts of wasted food that restaurants and industry and everybody generates. And so, have you ever considered, thinking about like a market for, or I don't know, like restaurants to help them to not over order or to take what they don't use or some sort of user. I don't know if there's necessarily a market around that. Some sort of.
There's a lot. There's actually there are people that are working on it separately, but we've got about a 500 item feature list and wish list, and so one of them is that a producer or a market manager in our markets, or even a restaurant, they would have the ability to check off, if this item doesn't get sold or if this doesn't get used, to then notify the gleaning organization or the food bank. And we haven't yet, what we're dealing with is just emerging customers, but we can see as we start to kind of do more, that being a really valuable service. And then we also are finding people asking, like, can I advertise a local composting service for restaurants on your system? So there are things that we're looking at in terms of the networking capabilities that we've created. So one of the things I thought about talking about, but I didn't. So there's a classic technology business book called Crossing the Chasm. Yes. So, and I've never been a fan of business books, but this one is a good read. You guys should read it. And they talk about the whole product, and a product is more than just the product that you make. The product is all the services and add-ons around it. So for software, it's not just, and this was written when you used to get software on disk, it's not just the software that you install, but it's the manuals and the training, and I can't remember all the things. But then beyond that, then there are people, if it's Microsoft Office, and if it's the Microsoft operating system, then you've got to have the hardware providers. So within a product environment, you have to be thinking about all of the related things. And so you start with what you do, and then we're actually building really good systems and support and scalable customer onboarding and support so that it's easy for people to get to use our system, so we don't have to hire a staff that we can't afford. But then we start looking at the integrations or the add-ons that we can plug into our system, partly like a Salesforce model, but also added services. And I think eventually what the potentials of network technologies and cloud-based technology is that you can keep all that information in one dashboard. I think it's a really hard design challenge to make it clear and to make the right thing pop out at the right time. So yeah, and so my vision would be that if you are in the food business, you can use the dashboard that we create, and it can be the conduit both for what we provide and what all these other services provide in that sense.
I was interested from a business model perspective, paying customer is the buyer at the end, like the restaurant or the co-op, or the paying customer is the aggregator?
It's a hybrid. It's the aggregator and the farmers. Even though they have to price it in a way that it does. There are businesses that want to charge the buyer for the right to buy this kind of food, and it is a model. And I don't think it's an effective model because the buyer just wants to pay. Maybe you can add a delivery charge. And we actually are going to add something that will enable some people to charge an extra percentage because we've had some call for that. But I'm doing it reluctantly. But what we've done is we've come up with a hybrid software as a service model where we have a flat monthly fee. And we've actually been involved, and we just are unrolling a new set of pricing tiers. And so it's a flat fee plus a percentage of the total sales. And in some cases it comes direct from the farmers, in some cases it comes from funds that the market manager, the market maker has created. But in the end, like, so if a farmer is going to pay, if their fees between local orbit and payment processing and the market maker are, say, 15 or 20%, when they price their item, they can put the net price they want to see, or they can put what they want the sales price to be and then see what their net is. So the idea is that they'll be able to make good pricing decisions, and the buyer really is the one paying for it in the end. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And so, but for the farmer, is local orbit actually helping them find the people? You go to a farmer saying, we already have 1,000 people who are using our platform to buy from people in your area. Like, what other than the efficiency of doing it, is there a built-in market that local orbit brings, saying, like, it's valuable for you to pay for our service because there are all these people who are already using it and will be buying from you?
We're building tools for lots of marketplaces.
Okay.
So we're not the marketplace. We're what powers the market. And so the reason that we do that is because we see within these food systems that what you would describe still goes to the many-to-many model, and you still have, if you had a marketplace and there was no aggregation, you might still have every person in this room buying from 20 different farmers, and then you're going to have 20 different pickup and delivery arrangements, and there's no streamlining. And so the attempts to do that have been really challenging, and there have been some crashed and burned. There are people who are still trying to figure it out. And for certain kinds of farmers, that makes sense. But the place that we've identified, kind of watching this, is that we see this growth of, this is about relationships. This is about the local, and it isn't about the technology. It's so not about the technology. It's about the relationship that the market maker has with the buyers and the sellers. And none of that, I don't think, is going to go away. That's how you keep this about the local. And what we want to do is just give them a set of tools to make it easier and to automate what makes sense. So they bring a market in, but what we found is we've started to develop tools and best practices, and we're starting to build capacity through our own education processes, is that it helps people increase the number of buyers and increase the number of farmers that want to participate in the network because it's easy and it's growing. And what we found, and I was just telling Gary, is like in our process, everybody who we've been piloting with has signed up and has done amazing referrals for us. And all of our business right now is coming from referrals because having access to those tools frees people up to grow their customer bases in different ways. Yeah.
Can I ask a question about your distributed team?
Yes.
How do you guys communicate?
We are really good at communicating. You know, I bring that, but I think I've found people who are really hands-on and vocal. And I'll tell you a story. We just released a huge update, like the biggest single update, except for one other time in the life of the company, of our technology. And our marketing director, who started in October, had been working with a startup, and he's in Pittsburgh. And they had, I don't know, about 70 people in the company. And he said, you know, what we did this mostly between Christmas and New Year's, what we did in 10 days with 9 people, including some part-time interns, and 2.5 developers, and a third of the team had only started since October or later. It was like what it took their company 6 months to do with 20 developers and 6 executives and 5 marketing people. But what the difference is that it's small and very efficient, and we're constantly with each other. And I do sometimes worry about, you know, the need to be together. But whatever we've done, we've built this relationship, and we've moved from Yammer to another tool, but we use lots of software services to communicate and to hold people accountable. We've got really defined requirements that every Friday somebody does what I call a move post. It's kind of a hashtag move, and you have to say, how did you move the business forward this week? And usually what gets defined in our Monday team meeting is, what are your successes and challenges? What are your goals for the week ahead? And hopefully that will guide you to your move post. So they also have really clear expectations. And it doesn't always work that way, but there's a framework that I think allows you to. I don't think that being in the same place would make that much difference at this point. And people have the freedom to go pick up their kids in the middle of the day and do what they want to do. And I'm paying people living wages, but I'm not paying them megabucks. And this is another benefit that they have. So that's an interesting thing. I've been thinking a lot. I think one day I'll write a book on managing the distributed team and helping people do that. Off-the-shelf open source e-commerce platform that could do a little bit of what we needed just to play a little bit where we were very hands-on with 2 markets. That was 2010 into 2011 really. And then we have slowly moved off to the point where everything that we have is pretty much our own code. It's a simple sort of tech stack, but we start with what do we need to do to prove whatever it is we're trying to prove, like there's an experiment. And so from the tech development, we're now at a point where we've got the core, I think really now with this last update that we just did and a set of financial management tools that we're rolling out hopefully next week, everything else we do right now is just adding value. The core functionality of the system is in place, but getting up to that point, we would really just meet and talk about it either every week or every 2 weeks. And we don't use a formal agile development process, but we use agile tools, and we make sure that people are constantly telling, those who aren't talking to customers, get the stories of the customers. And we'll throw a bunch of things up on the wall, on the virtual wall, and say, does it meet these objectives? And should we do it? And so we've got criteria that relates to customer retention and efficiency and revenue generation that we try to attach as much as possible to every decision we make about really everything, but developing the product. And I would say that everybody can come up with a different thing. It's discipline. We are a very, very disciplined organization, but within that there's a sonnet by Wordsworth about how within the structure of a sonnet there's incredible freedom. And in a way, that's kind of what I think we've done, is we've got incredible structure in the organization, but also because we've got huge limitations about what we're doing in the market that we're serving. Like, I can't go out and do the coolest design ever. It won't work. But these limitations force us to be inventive and hopefully a little bit lyrical, if you can do that with this.
Thank you.
So.